Beth Henderson had spent 12 years behind the counter of Mel's Diner, serving coffee, wiping tables, and listening more than most people talked. She wasn't just a waitress. She was an observer. She could tell when a man was lying to his wife by the way his hands fidgeted, when a mother was worried by the way she stirred her coffee without drinking it. Beth read people the way others read newspapers. Carefully, quietly, completely. That October Tuesday began like any other. The morning rush had ended, leaving only the hum of the ceiling fan and the smell of bacon and coffee lingering in the air. Beth wiped down the counter, her mind drifting to her grandson who lived 3 states away. She was 58, her knees ached, and her hair carried more silver than brown now, but she loved her job. Ordinary days could hide extraordinary moments. She knew that better than anyone. Then the bell above the door chimed, and in walked Richard Lawson and his young son, David. They'd been coming every Tuesday for about a month. Richard was the sort of man who drew attention effortlessly. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that cost more than Beth's monthly paycheck. He was always on the phone, talking about mergers, factories, expansion, big city words that didn't belong in their small town. David just ate, was quiet and polite. Sandy brown hair, deep hazel eyes, and a gentle smile that seemed off, somehow. Not shy, not sad, just uneven. That morning, as Beth watched him slide into the corner booth near the window, she noticed his left arm lagged behind, his grip weak as he tried to lift his chocolate milk. His smile tilted more to one side, and he blinked oddly, one eye slower than the other. "Morning, sweetheart," Beth said kindly, kneeling to his level. "How are you feeling today?" David's words came out slightly slurred. "I'm okay." Beth frowned. Something in the way his tongue moved, thick, delayed, reminded her of something she couldn't quite name. She turned to Richard, who barely looked up from his call. "He's just tired," he said dismissively. "We had a late night, with homework. Pancakes for him, coffee and toast for me." Beth nodded, but unease prickled her chest. She'd served thousands of customers over the years. Drunks hiding secrets, mothers hiding bruises, lonely men pretending to be okay. This was different. This was medical. Something wasn't right inside that boy. When she brought their food, she watched quietly. David's fork slipped from his fingers twice, before finally clattering to the floor. Richard picked it up each time without thinking. Beth crouched beside the boy. "Let me help you with that, honey." She steadied his hand. His left side was weaker. His eyes looked confused, frightened even, as though his body wasn't doing what he wanted. Something in her gut twisted. A week later, they came again. This time, Beth knew the moment she saw him. Things were worse. David's left arm hung completely limp. His left leg buckled as he climbed into the booth. His father caught him automatically, but never stopped scrolling on his phone. "Daddy, my head hurts," David whispered. Beth heard it from across the diner. "You need to drink more water, buddy," Richard said absently. "And sit up straight." Beth's heart clenched. This wasn't about posture. She brought their drinks, then crouched down again. "David, can you smile for me, sweetheart?" The boy tried. Only the right side of his face moved. Beth froze. Her mother's face flashed in her memory, that same lopsided expression years ago, just before the paramedics arrived. But this was a child. Children didn't have strokes, did they? She swallowed hard and turned to Richard. "Mr. Lawson," she said gently, "I think your son needs a doctor." Richard looked irritated. "He's fine. Kids today, they just complain about every ache and pain. He's tough." Beth had heard that tone before, the voice of denial, of fear disguised as control. She bit her tongue, but inside, her alarm bells were screaming. Then David's fork slipped again. His hand twitched, his eyes rolled slightly, and he swayed. Beth lunged forward, catching before he fell. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow. "David, can you hear me?" Richard dropped his phone at last, panic breaking through his mask. "What's happening to him?" "I think he's having a stroke," Beth said, steady but urgent. "That's impossible," Richard barked. "Children don't." But then he saw it. David's face, drooping on one side, his words slurred beyond understanding, his little body trembling. Beth grabbed Richard's arm. Sir, listen to me. I've seen this before. His left side has been getting worse every week. You need to act now. Something broke in Richard's eyes. For the first time in weeks, he truly saw his son and saw how much he'd missed. Call 911, Beth ordered, moving toward the phone. Richard stood frozen. I'll drive him myself. No, Beth snapped, her voice firm. You move him wrong. You could make it worse. Let the professionals handle this. She made the call, every second feeling like a countdown. She returned to the booth, damp cloth in hand, placing it gently on David's forehead. It's okay, sweetie. The ambulance is coming. You're being so brave. Richard held his son's hand, his phone lying forgotten on the table. I'm here, buddy, he whispered, voice shaking. Daddy's here. Customers stared, but Beth waved them off. Her whole world narrowed to the boy in front of her, and the terrified father realizing too late that love needed attention, not money. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside. Paramedics rushed in, assessing, lifting, stabilizing. Beth gave a quick report of what she'd seen over the past weeks. The limp, the slurred speech, the facial droop. One paramedic nodded grimly. You did good, ma'am. You probably saved his life. Richard followed them out, his face pale, his confidence gone. Beth wiped her hands on her apron, watching as the ambulance doors closed. She didn't know if she'd ever see them again, but she'd done what needed to be done. When she finally clocked out, her hands still trembled. She'd seen so many things in that diner. But this would stay with her. The ride to the hospital had been a blur. The flashing lights, the shrill sirens, all of it melted into a haze of fear for Richard Lawson. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about quarterly profits, investors, or the new plan he was opening. He was thinking about one thing only, his son. Beth followed the ambulance in her old sedan, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She didn't even know why she was driving there. Maybe because she couldn't bear to leave things unfinished. She'd seen too many stories in life stop halfway through. At County General Hospital, the sterile corridors swallowed Richard whole. He watched helplessly as doctors and nurses surrounded David, their calm urgency terrifying in its precision. Then the doors of the operating room shut, and he was left staring at the word surgery printed in red letters on the door. Beth found him in the waiting room, pale and lost. She sat quietly beside him, offering nothing but presence, the kind of quiet support only someone who's seen real life could give. For hours crawled by. Then Dr. Patricia Reeves, a tall woman with tired eyes and calm authority, approached them. Mr. Lawson, she said gently. Richard's legs felt weak. Yes, my son, David. Is he? The doctor placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Your son had what we call a pediatric stroke, likely caused by a rare condition known as Moyamoya disease. It restricts blood flow in the brain. It's extremely rare, especially in children. If you had waited even another day, the damage could have been permanent. Richard's breath caught. He sank into a chair, guilt washing over him in waves. Beth stood beside him, her presence steady. But Dr. Reeves continued, You got him here in time. The surgery went well. We were able to restore blood flow to the affected areas. He'll need therapy in time, but children recover remarkably well. There may be some weakness on his left side, but with rehabilitation, he should lead a full life. For a long moment, Richard couldn't speak. Then tears fell, the kind of tears that come from realizing how close you came to losing everything that truly mattered. When Dr. Reeves left, Richard turned to Beth. If you hadn't seen the signs, if you hadn't insisted, I don't know what would have happened. Beth gave a small smile. I didn't do anything special, Mr. Lawson. I just paid attention. People show us when they're hurting. We just have to be willing to see. Later, when Richard was allowed into David's room, he paused in the doorway. His son lay small and pale in a hospital bed, tubes and wires attached to his tiny arms. But his eyes, those bright hazel eyes, opened as soon as Richard stepped inside. Daddy, David whispered, voice hoarse. I was scared you would notice. Richard's heart shattered. He took his son's hand and sat beside him. I notice now, buddy, he said softly. I promise I'll always notice now. Beth watched from the doorway. tears stinging her eyes. She saw a man being broken open by love, stripped of arrogance and fear, rebuilt into something gentler, realer. Days passed. Richard didn't leave David's side. He read to him, learned about pediatric strokes, and spoke to doctors with humility he'd never known he was capable of. Each day, David's speech grew clearer. He began moving his left fingers, then his arm, then tried standing with support. 3 weeks later, Richard finally convinced Beth to let him drive her home. He wanted to thank her properly. But Beth simply smiled, hands folded in her lap. "You already have," she said. "You're being the father he needs now." Months rolled by. The maple leaves outside Mel's diner turned from red to brown, then fell away entirely. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Beth never expected to see them again, until one crisp January morning when the diner's bell chimed. She looked up from the counter, and there they were, David, walking in on his own 2 legs. His steps were slightly uneven, but proud. Behind him, Richard followed, dressed casually for once, no phone in sight, just a smile that reached his eyes. "Miss Beth!" David called out excitedly. "Look what I can do." He raised his left arm above his head, slow but steady. The entire diner turned to look as Beth gasped and clapped her hands together. "Well, would you look at that?" she said, eyes misty. David ran into her arms, hugging her tightly. She felt the solid weight of a boy who'd fought his way back from the edge. Richard approached quietly. "I can never thank you enough," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save his life. You saved mine, too." Beth shook her head. "You saved yourself, Mr. Lawson. You just needed to start looking again." They sat in their old booth, but everything was different now. Richard cut David's pancakes, helped him pour syrup, and listened, really listened, as his son talked about school therapy and how he was learning to throw a football with his right hand until his left was stronger. "Miss Beth," David said between bites, "Dad says you're a hero." Beth smiled. "I'm just a waitress who pays attention, sweetheart. The real hero's sitting right next to you." Richard reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "Turns out the most important meetings weren't in my office after all." Before leaving, Richard pulled Beth aside near the counter. "I wanted to tell you something. I've started a scholarship fund for children who need urgent medical care but can't afford it. It's called the Beth Henderson Fund for Pediatric Health Awareness." Beth blinked, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Richard, that's beautiful." He smiled, humbled. "It's the least I can do, and I've stepped back from the company board. I still work, but David comes first now. I finally learned that success doesn't mean anything if the people you love feel invisible." As they turned to leave, David called back one last time, his voice bright and confident. "Miss Beth, will you always work here?" Beth chuckled. "As long as there are people who need someone to notice them, sweetheart, I'll be right here." She watched them walk out into the sunlight, father and son, hand in hand, healed not just in body but in heart. And as the door swung shut behind them, Beth returned to wiping down the counter. Outside, the maple tree swayed gently in the wind, and she thought about how the smallest act, a glance, a word, a little attention, could change the course of someone's entire life. Because sometimes the greatest heroes aren't surgeons, CEOs, or scientists. Sometimes they're just waitresses who care enough to see what everyone else overlooks.